Everybody, welcome to episode 30 of Discussions with the Pros. Tonight we have with us Crispin, Cain, and Tamar Kaye from Mendocino Spirits. Crispin, Tamar, welcome. Crispin, can you tell us what your role is with Mendocino Spirits?
Thank you, Gil. I am Director of Production. I am President of the corporation, and I'm in charge of creation of the products from start to finish.
Okay, wonderful. Right, because I see there with you in your background, you also were were you making cognac? Am I correct about that?
I started distilling at Germain Robin Brandy here in California, and Hubert Germain Robin was from Cognac. And so Cognac is brandy made in Cognac only, and we were in California. Though Hubert brought the traditions of Cognac with him and traditional Cognac stills that I'm still using to this day. I started distilling when I was 26 in August of 1989. So it's almost been 32 years of professional distillation. And for about half of that time, Tamar and I have been in business for ourselves.
Wonderful. And Tamar, I understand you are a horticulturalist. Am I correct about that?
Yes, I am the horticulturalist to Crispin's alchemist, and together we make beautiful music. I am a marketing director for Mendocino Spirits and Tamar Distillery, and yes, and chief and queen of the garden. We started our endeavors with rose petal liqueur that landed us a bunch of high praise and got us started in the industry of booze.
Yeah, rose petal liqueur.
Mm-hmm. Oh, that's
wow! Yeah. That sounds delicious. That sounds wonderful. And how did you decide to go? And how did you decide to go to whiskey?
Oh, well, I'll tell you. The very first day that I was distilling with Hubert, he says to me, "One day we'll have to make bourbon." And at 26, I said, "You're making some of the best brandy in the world. Why would you even consider making bourbon?" And his response, simply put, was, "This is what Americans want. And brandy is a hard sell." And
good answer. Good answer.
Yeah. And then I'll tell you this, in the early 90s, I went and visited my grandfather in Tacoma, my mother's father, and I brought him a bottle of Germain Robin brandy that I was very proud of being a part of as a Christmas gift. And he would not even open the bottle. And I said, what's with that? And he said, "Well, I'm a bourbon man." And I knew that. Okay, but I thought he'd at least open it and give it a try and release it on the family. And he didn't even want it opened. He said, "Wow, brandy is something riverboat gamblers drink." And I'm an
wow. That's hilarious. That is really funny. Well, more power to him, because I think that we've ended up benefiting from that bias, because I'd like, we're all going to try now. We're going to have the tastings here now. Let's start off with the bourbon. Okay, the straight bourbon. So everybody, the order where we're going in here is bourbon, then rye, then gin. Those of you who've come on more recently, please remember that please note that your video should be off right now if you can, because Crispin and Tamar are having some bandwidth issues. So if we keep our videos off, it'll be easier for us to go through this without any technical difficulties. So Crispin, can you please tell us about the bourbon that we are about to taste?
Yes, this is bourbon I distilled in 2016. The mash bill is 65% corn, 20% malted rye, and 15% malted barley. Okay. 2016, I had barrels from a cooperage called Barrel 53. And then I started buying barrels that year from Canton Cooperage in Kentucky. And so this has a combination of both. This is mostly Canton Cooperage wood, but there's a healthy sprinkling of about a third of the barrels that year were from Barrel 53.
It is, we're getting a lot of comments, by the way, just for your own benefit. Afterwards, Eric will send you a copy of all the comments in the chat. Okay, so he'll be able to get everything that people are saying. Can you tell us a little bit about the sizes of the barrels for this?
Yeah, I was using standard bourbon barrels, approximately 53 gallon capacity, American white oak, number 2 and number 3 char, and the wood from barrel 53, they would not get very specific with me about it, and I wasn't real happy about that. I mean, I know they're good people there, and we're all working hard in this business, but getting specifics about what I bought from them and what I was buying was a little tough. Canton cooperage was far more forthcoming, and I used a combination of wood that had been air dried for 24 months and 36 months. And it was that year that I decided to go to strictly the subsequent production, 17, 18, 19, 20, and into 21. I'm using strictly 36-month air dried wood, and it's been very good.
Got it. And then the grain that's going in here, can you tell us about where the corn and the rye and the barley are coming from? Are you growing them all yourselves? You know, Tamar, is this part of your, expertise here?
No. The grains, the corn and the barley are coming out of the Midwest, and the rye is coming out of Central Oregon.
Okay. Can you tell us a little bit about where, when you say the Midwest, because we have a lot of sources here for, corn and energy.
Okay, so some of the corn is from Ohio, and some of it's from Indiana.
Got it. Okay. Okay. And then is the malting done at the source, or are you doing the malting yourselves?
No, the malting is done at the source. We're pretty small. I don't have room to malt here at all. And so all that's being done elsewhere. And it's just how it is. So I'm buying both malted grain and malt extract, and it's working pretty well.
Well, I got to tell you, the comments we're getting here, people love this. So it is working. Is there something special about your water source? Is there something about the local water? Because, for instance, when we spoke to Lisa Wicker from Widow Jane, she's using heavy water from limestones and stuff, like limestone quarries and stuff like that. Is there anything about your water that you think is a little bit special here?
Well, it's a bit the opposite of those limestone caverns. We're near the headwaters of the Russian River. Our water here is very pure, and I'm actually filtering it once before it goes into mashing.
Okay.
And that seems to be working pretty well. I have a strong background in winemaking, and so I approached the whole fermentation from a winemaking perspective. In fact, for fermentation, I'm using a combination of 2 enzymes and a champagne yeast. And so my fermentation goes relatively slow, 6 to 10 weeks.
Oh, that is
fairly high specific gravity of, between 1.065 and 1.078 in that range. So I end up with what I will call malt wines at somewhere between 9 and 11% alcohol.
Okay. And then with respect to, how long it's spending in the barrel, are you always trying to do at least 3 years? Is that a goal of yours? Is that part of your process?
At this point, yes. The first batch of bourbon we released was only 2, and it did really well. Matter of fact,
It did really well in blind tasting.
Yes, it did really well in blind tastings.
If people saw the 2, if they saw the 2, then it was definitely a different.
Isn't that incredible? I mean, that really is. I mean, I'm glad you mentioned that, actually, Tamar, because one of my favorite ryes that I ever had, and we're going to talk about this, was the Low Gap 2-year. Okay, which was just delicious. And you're right, there's a bias. There's definitely a bias with respect to the age. But that's really fascinating. You said that people loved it, but not as much when they saw the age on it. That is absolutely fascinating.
God, both the Low Gap 2-year-old bourbon and the Low Gap 2-year-old rye were both well reviewed. Paul Picault absolutely loved them, for example. Anthony Diaz Blue once referred to me as one of the 10 best distillers in the world today, which is very generous of him to say.
Very nice.
sold really well. You know, I have 2 bottles of that 2-year-old rye left. I have 6 bottles in the library of that 2-year-old bourbon left. And, you know, a part of that was a function of economics, and a part of it was the fact that on our end and with some of the salespeople, we agreed it was a good product. And after we saw some good reviews, we decided we should really release it, and we did.
Got it.
So,
But we're for minimum age for the bourbons, kind of we're aiming at 3 years, and
Aiming at
then
3.
and barreling older whiskey.
Got it.
yeah,
But by the way, what I see that there on your website, there are 2 different company names. I'm seeing Mendocino, but I'm also seeing Tamar Distillery. What are the differences? Are they pretty much the same company? Does one own the other? What's the structure there?
Mendocino Spirits is a brand
yeah.
of Tamar Distillery, and
Okay.
so we're going to continue on with the Low Gap brand and the Russell Henry Gin brand, and we're also going to do Mendocino Spirits, but they're all made by Tamar Distillery. It's kind of like the Anheuser-Busch to the Budweiser.
Okay.
except we're
Perfect
tiny-
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We're,
Okay.
we're teeny tiny rural low bandwidth people trying to play with the big boys.
Yeah.
That's funny you mentioned low bandwidth given our technical issues tonight. That
Yeah.
was that's very well done. I like that. Speaking of Mendocino, let's go on now to the Mendocino Spirits 8-year rye. By the way, your labels are beautiful. I mean, I hope people, you know, I don't know if you can see this here. It's a little tough, but your labels are absolutely gorgeous. Okay, and can you tell us about this rye? May I assume that the rye that goes in here is the same rye that went into the bourbon? Am I correct about that?
Yes, it's the same rye malt that went
Okay,
into
same rye. By the way, is it 2-row? I mean, people have been asking here in the comments. We've gotten some real geeks here in our group. Do you know anything with respect to the rye? Is it a 2-row rye, or was it 4-row or 6-row?
Yes, it was 2-row rye. Yes, it is.
Okay, got
I
it.
think 2-row is really rich, and I like it a lot. And in fact, I spent some time looking for rye, malted rye and rye malt extract. I'm using them both in there, and I had take a couple. It took me about 1.5 years, 2 years to find the rye I wanted to use for whiskey, and so this is rye we made in 2012. Wait, I want to back up just a little bit. You mentioned the labels. I want to give a shout out to Jeremy Logan, graphic artist at the Color Mill in Fort Bragg, California, who working with us, has designed these labels for us. I wanted something that was reminiscent of Alphonse Mucha. We told him what we wanted and what we were doing, and we'd actually talked for several years before we worked on a label together, and he's just absolutely the best. So
Well, they stand out. I mean, these are absolutely beautiful. They're works of art for sure. So, what percentage? Is this 100% rye?
this is 100% malted rye. This is rye I distilled in 2012.
Okay.
And in fact, at the time in 2012, I was strictly labeling things as low gap. So that low gap 2-year-old rye that you remember so well, this is it all these years later, in fact.
No wonder I like this.
Grew up.
As we were bottling the 2-year-old rye that year, there was, I had a lot of it. And as bottling ground on, I start to wear a little thin. And one day we ended the day and there's 250 gallons left in a tank. And I decided it was going back into barrels. And that was when the day I decided to buy used and reconditioned cognac barrels from Vicard and put it away for, I used to say I'm putting it away for a rainy day, but apparently I put it away for a heat wave.
Hey, this is delicious. And I don't know if I told you this, but I became familiar with Low Gap several years ago. One of the other people who usually participates with us, Todd Coe, I don't think he's able to join us tonight, but Todd and I host the craft whiskey table at a fundraiser every year for a homeless shelter that we've been supporting for many years. And every year prior to that event, I have a meeting with Brett Pontani from Binny's at Binny's, where he and I go through the aisles to decide what we're going to have at the fundraiser every year. And Brad is the one who introduced me to Low Gap. And then after that, I ended up buying a few bottles for myself because it was just so darn good. Really, I enjoy it. And I guess that makes sense why I would love this 8-year right now. I know, by the way, I noticed the ABV on this. So this one is 47.3. Do you ever do things at a higher ABV than what we're seeing here?
Yes, as a matter of fact, last year, from our 2017 production in those really fine Canton Cooperage barrels, I bottled one barrel each of barrel strength corn, bourbon, and rye. And in fact, the rye sold out pretty fast as one. Those were 60 and 62.5% respectively. I think one of them was 61.7. And so we have.
And those are under the Low Gap label.
Yep, those are Low Gap products.
And are you aging everything there in Mendocino? I see barrels behind you.
Yes.
Yeah, every drop is fermented, distilled, and aged here at the distillery.
Mm-hmm.
So since it's pretty hot there, what's your angel share every year?
My angel share is still pretty average at 3 to 5%.
Is that because of the humidity?
I will. The building, the cellar we're in is heavily insulated, so I'm able to control humidity. And I simply, the end of the day on a dry day, I will wet the floor underneath the barrels, and that's all I do for it. And I keep the humidity in here right now. Hygrometer is reading 50%, and so I'll keep it 50 to 62. And it doesn't get more than 82 degrees in here. In the winter, it gets down to the low 40s, upper 30s in here.
Okay, so that's not as much of an issue. Interesting.
Northern California, where we have mountains, and as a crow flies, we're only about 30 or 35 miles from the ocean.
Yep.
So we're in the mountainous northern part of California.
And we had a couple of snows this year. It's wet and it doesn't stick, but we've had several snow days. January is usually really cold and dry here. And so February we'll see a little snow.
So we have all those extreme.
Yeah.
Interesting. Interesting. Yeah. And is there a particular time of year that you end up actually bottling, taking things, or is it just whenever it's ready, it's ready?
Well, there's some of that happens. I try to aim, I'm aiming at a big bottling of bourbon in August or September right now. I still haven't unified yet, but that begins in the next couple of weeks.
Mm-hmm.
And I try to get it all in. Everything I'm going to bottle in a given year, I want to have done by early September. So I still, September, October, I'll have sales into the distribution system for the holidays, and we'll get that done.
Got it. You mentioned distribution. I'm going to jump ahead to one of the questions that I sent you before we go to the gin, because the gin's a completely different animal. Are your spirits currently available outside of California?
Mendocino Spirits is California and Kentucky right now.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's say that people here want to buy more. Okay. How would they do so?
Yeah, we have a website that will have a buy now button that is imminent any day now. And so that'll make it easier for people in California and Kentucky. But right now people are calling me up and processing their information on a Square, and we're able to ship anywhere in California and Kentucky. For our other products, we're available on Flaviar and through the Cadell and Williams website. They have a retail website. So we're Googleable to be found out there, and we're in various places. There was a bar in Tennessee.
Yeah.
That one of our Facebook friends tagged us. They found Low Gap at a bar in Knoxville, Tennessee. So we get a lot. It's how we find it where we're at is by customer and friend feedback.
So
okay.
Part of the bigger answer to that is that Mendocino Spirits is still a relatively new brand that is still finding its way out into the market. And so just be patient with us, and it will get there. It's just taking some time.
Okay. I'm definitely going to tell tell Brett Pontani and a few other people how much we're all liking this stuff, because I'm getting a lot of good comments and private messages about how good this is. But by the way, distribution is not a challenge just for you. Several months ago, we had Herman Mihalik from Dad's Hat Rye on here, and he's from Pennsylvania, and he gave us a sample of one of their single casks, which is only available in Pennsylvania. Luckily, I was going to see my family in Philadelphia, and I ended up bringing back a bunch of bottles that people had sent me money for that we bought ahead of time that he ended up shipping to my mother. So, you know, and I mentioned, and I see a few people here saying that they're going to be going to California, so maybe there's some way that they can figure this out. I will tell you that I'm probably going to get some private messages from people asking me to put them in touch with you, okay, to see about how they can get that.
People can contact us directly through the Mendocino Spirits website and the Tamar Distillery website. There's contact
And
in button there
and our Facebook page.
and our Facebook page.
Mhm.
Got it. So how complicated and difficult is it for a distillery like yours to establish a presence at a place like Binny's? So clearly Binny's had low gaps several years ago, okay?
Yeah.
Right now it doesn't. Can you tell us a little bit about the business end of this?
Well, funny you should say that. We've had a long relationship with Alembic Incorporated and Craft Distillers. And what's come about in the last few years is, you know, Alembic and Craft Distillers, Alembic was the parent company making Jermaine Robin brandy. And in 2018, well, let me back up. So Alembic had a fairly good sales staff working territories in the United States, and relationships with distributors outside of California. So at that point in the beginning, we were selling all of our product to Alembic, and they were distributing it farther and wider. In 2018, Alembic sold Jermaine Robin brandy to Ernest Gallo and Modesto, and they eliminated most of their sales staff. And so, you know, things changed, and we've been having to recover from that change, because they did very little about it, you know, for us. And though it's been a long and positive relationship in many, many ways, you know, what's happening now with us is we're taking complete control of
Our marketing distribution.
our marketing and distribution.
We've taken Utah and California, and the direct to consumer in Kentucky. We're very, very excited about that.
Yep.
And we've got a small toe into New York, but we're slowly but surely making new connections in all sorts of corners that we're already loved in.
And so in California and New York, we're carried by LibDib, and LibDib has a number of more states that we'll chip away at as the next 6 and 12 months pass. And if we can get into Illinois, we want to be there. And you know, we have the product to support it, and we'd love to be back in Binny's. I was really disappointed to hear that Binny's, we weren't there anymore. I've done special bottlings for Binny's. I've done special barrel finishes on whiskey for Binny's, and I want all that back again.
Got it. Well, a number of us have, you know, relationships with people there and other stores around here, and I'm sure, given the comments, and by the way, again, this rye is just freaking delicious. I love the spice. I love the sweetness of it. It's really just a very well-rounded rye. It's just delicious. You know, people are really enjoying it. So yeah, I'm sure that people here will be talking to our friends in the business here about your spirits, and hopefully that will help. Now, what we're going to go on to now, though, is something unique. This is only the second time that I believe this is only the second time that we have tasted a non-whiskey bottling. We tasted a rum several months ago from a local distiller here in Illinois called Thornton Distilling, that actually had a kosher for Passover rum, which is special because a lot of us on here are Jewish. So that was a big deal, okay, getting there. So we did taste a rum. That was our only non-whiskey spirit, I believe, until now. So please tell us about this gin. And by the way, the first question I have for you, even before we get to the gin, Tamar, are you involved in the botanicals with respect to the gin because of your horticultural background?
Yes, we work together on quality and flavor, but Crispin did 2 years of gin research specifically.
Yeah, and I'm buying the majority of the botanicals I buy from Monterey Bay Spice and San Francisco Herb Company. Though I think by now I'm buying everything from Monterey Bay Spice. They understand what I'm doing, and they send me their absolutely best of everything. They know exactly what I'm doing,
Yeah.
and it's been
And-
a really good
And,
relationship.
and we see people are getting into their gin and finding it delicious.
Yeah,
But it is a flavor experience. I would think after the whiskey.
so
Do you want
about
to talk about the barrel?
the gin and the barrel. So the gin, this is my basic London dry gin that's been barrel aged. My first foray into barrel aging gin was with Russell Henry Dark Gin, which is aged for 1 year in both new bourbon barrels and new Limousin oak cognac barrels from Vicard. And we've got a lot of traction with that product. People really love it, and it is one of the best things I've ever made. And so doing that, I wanted to age gin for a greater amount of time. I wanted to get into strictly Limousin oak and find out what happens. And I've been looking at this particular barrel. This is a single barrel, a single 350 liter barrel, medium plus toast, some of the finest wood out of France. And what it does for the botanicals is really incredible. So in this gin, there are juniper berries, coriander, cardamom, lemon peel, orange peel, grains of paradise, licorice root, orris root, rosemary, and cinnamon. And it's just an amazing thing. Yes, someone in the comment says they get the cardamom. What happens in here is just absolutely incredible, unexpected, a surprise. It was an experiment
Yeah.
that came out really well.
Go ahead and pour some.
All right.
And I see Eric said just added some tonic and
Yes.
wow, and we really do enjoy the dark gin and tonic. You
Yep.
can add lime, but no lime necessary because it has so many flavor profiles going on there. But this is
That's the Russell Henry
Russell
Dark
Henry Dark, and then you can see the color
difference.
for the 5 year.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow,
So-
that's a huge, that's a dramatic difference.
dramatic.
Yes, it
and,
is.
and they're both
Yes.
lovely. They're both really, really lovely. And we've got a lot of feedback from gin lovers that they really love our gin.
Mm-hmm.
And we
And-
appreciate that very much because we were not gin lovers when we made gin,
No, not in the beginning,
but here we are.
but now. Yeah.
You know,
Yep.
I'm about to be 48 and love gin and tonics. Who knew?
I totally recommend spending some quality time nosing this before you drink it and allowing
It's
it.
too late. You didn't tell us that. I mean, I'm sorry. Well, hold on. So wait. Okay.
Yeah.
You should have said that before, because if you look at the comments, people have been drinking this. They've been
They have.
enjoying it. We have comments. You
Um,
know, it's too late for that comment, Crispin. I'm sorry. It's
No.
just too late for that comment.
Also, on a nice rock and let it just, you know, hang out and enjoy that as a cocktail on its own is beautiful.
Yeah.
You know, we're getting some questions. One of the questions, and this is a really good one. Assuming that one were able to buy this, what do these bottles go for approximately?
Well, this one starts at 170, in fact, and it might stay there for a couple of years. This is a single barrel. I put 92 gallons in the barrel. I recovered about 72 gallons after aging and evaporation.
Wow.
And it's one of the most exotic things I've ever made in my life, and represents a culmination of years of research and work and a desire to bring beauty into the world. And
It is special. I mean, this really is. This is a special dram. This really stands out. Yeah, it's wonderful. Now, did you also say you have the 5 year?
Yeah,
Yeah,
this is the
this-
5 year.
this is
So the
5
5
year.
years, 170.
Yeah, the
Okay.
Russell Henry Dark Gin is 60. Is much more approachable in terms of the pocketbook.
Okay.
But the Mendocino Spirits 5 year aged gin is much more rare. And in fact, I had one barrel from 2015 and I have two barrels from 2016, and that's it. I've got more from 2016 in some nice American oak that also presents very, very well.
It'll be another span of time before
Yeah.
before time enough soaks in a barrel to get another round of it.
And so what I'll do with the 2016 effort is I will, again, I will bottle the single barrel of Limousin oak, and then I'll probably blend the other barrel with the American oak. And so there'll be more of it. So I think I have like 7 or 8 bourbon barrels from 2016. And so there'll be more of it. And I'll bring the price down a little bit with the American oak. So
Got
it'll
it.
be easy to get. Plus, we're actually considering, and we'll do this, I've found smaller bottles to put it in so people can buy a smaller amount and make it easier to purchase. Because I want that. I want people to be able to try this and not just be shut out because of the price.
Right, you know, a boutique whiskey company. I don't know how familiar you are with boutique whiskey company, Monique Houston. They have a lot of bottles they have 375 milliliter bottles. Okay, 307, and they're you know they're expensive, per ounce, but they are easier to buy, of course, because it's a smaller bottle. So that's an interesting strategy. What I'd like to do now is this. So clearly we started about 10 minutes late because of the technical issues. It's not a big deal. We need to be a little bit careful here with bandwidth when we go to questions and answers. Okay, so what I want to do is this. So first we're going to have see if Eric has any questions, but I want everybody to make sure that if you have a question to ask, please use the reactions button and raise your hand for a chat. But I'm going to ask you when you ask your question, Eric, do you think that we can handle? Do you think we can handle video during the questions and answers or not?
Yeah, I think we can, as long as when you're asking your question, flip your video on and then flip it off when the question is done.
Okay, great. So, Eric, why don't you go first, of course, if you have any questions. And by the way, Eric, I got to tell you, I'm really pissed at you because after we bottled everything, after we bottled all these samples, and I asked you which leftover bottle you wanted to keep, you selected the gin, and I was not happy. Okay, and oh, dude. So you got the gin. Don't get me wrong, I got the rye. I'm really happy with that. That gin, that is special. So I'll be quiet now. Eric, go for it.
I actually have 2 questions. One, for the gin, what made you decide on using Limousin oak versus any other oak?
Limousin oak is something that's traditionally used in cognac, and the Vicard, Tonnery cooperage in cognac is the best cooperage in France, if not the world. And the quality of the wood, the quality of the craftsmanship, quality of the product that comes out of those barrels is just the best ever. And so part of it was my bias from my training in my apprenticeship with Hubert, and then the unquestionable quality of the wood and the products that come out of it. I just love the flavor of Limousin oak, and I just had to use it. And seeing what came out of a year of aging was really wonderful. And so I wanted to experiment with extended aging of gin, and it's worked very well.
Well, it is absolutely phenomenal, and I am very happy that I got the extras of the bottle of gin that you said. So I appreciate it. One other question, since you do have low gap and you have Mendocino spirits, what is the decision factor on what goes to one company versus the other?
Well, that's a good question. We definitely are going to, as we progress, aim most of our ultra premium product at the Mendocino Spirits labels. I have other things in barrels in terms of blends of finished whiskeys that are all in-house. And by the way, I just want to point out that I don't buy any bulk spirits for the whiskey. And if I ever make a whiskey with bulk spirit, everyone's going to know I'm not going to hide behind nothing, but I'm making every drop that goes into the bottle. And so I have created complex blends of rye and malted wheat, and malted rye and bourbon. And some of those I've released in small amounts, and a lot of it's still in barrels. So when we get to that, there'll be blends of finished whiskeys that are now 7 to 11 years old that are really impressive. And I know you're all going to love them. The straight rye is fabulous, but next time we all do this, we'll have these other things in bottles, and we'll be having a whole different conversation.
Awesome. I look forward to it.
And I would chime in about the Mendocino spirits is we're also really emphasizing Mendocino County and the artistic things that are coming from Mendocino County, the integrity and the quality of the delicious things happening in Mendocino County.
Mm-hmm.
And so the artwork reflects that. And through time and evolution, we're kind of decided to tell stories of Mendocino County through Mendocino spirits. Like, for example, the Captain Fletcher built Navarro Mill,
Yeah.
and Navarro Inn. He's a real guy. And the lady on the bourbon kind of represents the spirit of California.
Yeah.
And the pioneering women of Mendocino County.
Mm-hmm.
And the raven kind of speaks for itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
So there's also small efforts that will go out through Mendocino spirits that tell stories of our area.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. Paul, you're up.
No,
You're muted, Paul.
Directions are hard. All right, cheers. I'll stick with the gin at first, and I should ask the moderators, do I get like a Paul question or a normal question?
You can do a Paul question.
Okay.
You
so
can do
that's
a
two
Paul
questions.
question. You can do a Paul question. You can do a Paul
So,
question.
question A1 is the gin. Are you thinking about working with any different types of barrels over time, especially with the sourcing from some of the French cooperages and everything? It strikes me that one thing that I would absolutely love to see is a botanical forward gin like this aged in something insane like a Chateau Margaux barrel or something.
Well, there's a possibility there. I'd like to experiment with at least having blended into it, used Cabernet Sauvignon barrels, for example. There's a possibility of used Cabernet barrels from a winery I'm not going to mention yet, but a prestigious winery in Sonoma, where they're getting barrels from Essentiel in the Aquitaine. The wood is very nice. We've already experimented with rye in one of those barrels and created a blend that's coming. And certainly the possibility of doing some gin in some of those. And I'd like to find out what happens. I mean, it's something we should look at. And your suggestion there is a really good one, and so I'm open to it. And I really, this was an experiment. I didn't know what the outcome was going to be with this gin, and here we are, and it's absolutely wonderful. So I'm willing to keep experimenting and find out where the path leads us.
For some reason, it just kind of connects me to the idea of that kind of wine, and there's something flowing through the veins there that just seems like a fantastic combination. I don't know why. Not vermouth per se, but there's something magic going on there. But I'll move on to question 1B, which is still question 1. It's just a Paul style question. Entry proof on the bourbon into the barrel, is that something that you guys look at and disclose, or is that?
Oh, sure. I mean, bourbon, the word straight bourbon whiskey are heavily regulated, and we must conform to those regulations in order to use the word straight bourbon whiskey. So on the broader picture, Distillation, I'm ending up at about 70% alcohol after distillation, and then adding some water right away to bring it down to between 60 and 62.5%, where it goes into the barrel. And so I have no problem disclosing that. That's just how it is. So, you know, the bourbon regulations, it must be made in America. It must be 51% of single grain, and that's usually corn. It has to come out of the still at less than 80 and greater than 65. Must go in the barrel at between 60 and 62.5. It must be standard bourbon barrel, 200 liters, 53 gallons, American white oak, charred. Must remain undisturbed for a minimum of 24 months, at which time we can use the words straight bourbon whiskey.
Thank you so much.
Sure.
Ariel Eisenberg.
Hey, Crispin. Hey, Tamar. Thank you so much for being with us tonight and the samples. My wife hates whiskey. I was going to let her try the gin. She said, yeah, I'll try the gin. I think I accidentally spilled it or something. I don't know. There's not enough for her to try anymore. So to touch on the artwork, which is really, really gorgeous, and it reminds me of you know, some of the concert posters that I have. Have you guys ever thought about selling prints, poster prints of the label art?
Yes, we've had a lot of requests for posters.
Yeah.
That'll be a part of the online store.
So,
And so my question to you is, would you buy a full-size poster or 11 by 17?
I don't know. It depends on once I get my man cave finished up, how much wall space I have.
I've had a few people say full-size poster, but most people want a smaller one just because it's a big commitment. But it's definitely on the horizon.
definitely.
Wonderful.
Josh.
Yeah, Josh Eisenberg. Yeah, Josh.
Hey, thanks everyone. I'll leave myself off video to just preserve bandwidth, but this is amazing stuff. I have two hopefully quick questions, if that's okay. The first one is about the bourbon. I was getting a crazy amount of like stippling on the edges of my glass as I was drinking that, and I was just wondering, like, that's a kind of like a density thing that, I don't know if I'm using the right term, but like a density that I'm not used to seeing, a viscosity that I'm not used to seeing. Can you like just help me understand like what is going on to do that?
Sure. Well, working backwards towards production, you know, I'm not cold stabilizing and filtering this, and so there's a certain amount of fat that's present, and in fact, distilling in a pot still can be very fatty, especially if you're running the fire very high and you're distilling very quickly. But that's not the case with this, and in fact, you know, I intend to preserve some of the fat that's in it because it carries some of the flavor. And you know, the first bourbon we bottled, the low gap 2-year-old, I was diligent. I cold stabilized, I filtered, and it did really well. But in fact, you know, I moved away from it because you know, 150 years ago, there was no cold stabilization and filtration. I mean, the worst I do is a fine mesh screen to get any bee's knees and stuff out of it on its way into the filler. So distillation, you know, I was taught to do 2 distillations in a 24-hour period. And I'll just let you in on some of the secrets here. A part of what happens is there's a you know, first distillation that happens during the day, and there's a first distillation that happens during the night. And the one that happens during the day goes a little faster in terms of working our way towards the end. You know, I'll come in at if it's a first distillation, I'll come in and catch the overnight at 6 in the morning, and by 12:30, 1 o'clock, we have finished that distillation, and then we're on maybe 2 o'clock, you know, in the afternoon, and then from like 2:30, 3 o'clock, 3:30, the next run's going. And that overnight run will tend to be, this is where we redistill heads, because all our fractions that aren't safe for drinking get redistilled, just like they do in cognac, in traditional cognac distillation. In fact, the fire is set very low overnight. No one's present. I start the still. I've gathered information on a graph, and I know, I have a gauge on the gas on the still in millibars, I think it is, and I know how much alcohol is in the pot at that point. I know how many hours until I or my assistant come back early in the morning, and then I have precise information about how to set the fire, so that when we come back in 12 to 16 hours, all the alcohol has been cooked out, and it's just absolutely perfect. And so that overnight distillation, where the fire is really low and it just simmers real slow all night long, is one of the secrets to making great spirits. And the other side of this is condensation temperature. There's precise condensation temperatures that are for the first distillation, the second distillation. It makes a huge difference. And then moving on to the second distillation, deciding on the cuts, especially between heart and tail. I'm cutting based on information that is handed from master to apprentice and not written down in cognac. And I see other people in their YouTube videos and whatnot still collecting heart an hour or more after I've cut. And so this makes a huge difference in the final product.
That was amazing. Thank you so much. I'm going to give up the floor to Michael Bloom. I'll ask my second question if we have time later.
Sure.
No, it makes me so happy to hear from you, Crispin and Tamar. You've been extraordinarily generous with your product and with your time. In fact, I don't know if this group knows it, but I think, Tamar, you were one of the rare guests we've had that actually found our group. So I kind of want to hear how you did that. But also, my whiskey question is this. You've done a lot of experimentation. Low Gap even had Bavarian wheat in your arsenal way back when, and I still have some of that on my shelf. So what's next in terms of experimentation? Do you have single malt coming? Do you have something else that you're playing with?
Well, I've done various kinds of whiskey, including the wheat, and I'll tell you, the wheat was the first whiskey we made, the malted wheat, and people really loved that thing. But as soon as I released bourbon, it's like sales of it just dropped off, and I still have a pallet and a half of Low Gap 4-year-old Bavarian hard wheat sitting in inventory that's been there for, I forget, 6 years, 5 years.
But people do buy it. And,
I do.
yeah, locally we have a store that we have 100 proof of the Bavarian wheat that is out, and somebody around here is drinking that 100 proof because they order it every week.
Yeah, and it goes out every week.
But
okay, so the thing I haven't done is a strictly malted barley whiskey, and it's definitely on my radar.
yeah,
And
you're not the only one to ask.
yeah, and so I'm gonna want to extend the aging on that as long as it's practical. I'd love to get to 10 years on a malted barley and make that happen. I'm currently 58, and so I better get busy. I expect to keep doing this till I'm 70 or 72, unless I don't. Yes, and 100% malted barley.
Yes.
Yes.
And I think the thing you're excited about now is having old enough whiskeys to blend with.
Right. And so what happened to the malted wheat? I ended up malted wheat that was still in barrels, which I'm almost out of. I ended up blending with malted rye. And in fact, my father's family came from Ireland and ended up in Minnesota. I mean, the bigger picture with them is my grandparents land. I didn't know this till recently. They landed in Bozeman, Montana, and worked in the mines while they homesteaded land and had that land long enough to sell it and moved to Minnesota where they really wanted to be with more family. So they worked really hard to get there. And in fact, when Prohibition started, my father's family had a dairy that was a front for an illicit distillery that existed for more than 3 decades, even into legalization. And they kept it up into the early 50s. They had a site where they distilled, and they had a second site where they did storage and aging. And I got to talk to various members of the family. My father's the youngest of 13 kids. So his memories of the distillery aren't as strong as his older brothers, who were 10 and more years older than him, who actually worked in the distillery. And the older I got, the more information they'd give me. There were things they didn't want to say to me as I was growing up, because I had heard this story starting when I was a child. And it was this funny story. And then as I got older, I kept hearing the more serious side of things, and really didn't get the full picture until I was older than 35. Eventually, though, I had several conversations with my Uncle Frank, who was the last one living who was willing to talk about practical day-to-day things that happened in the distillery. And so my malted rye, malted wheat blend, which is 93% rye and 7% wheat, was something that my Uncle Frank suggested. And he said that his father was making something very similar to that, and that I should, and he didn't get specific about proportions, but he said I should do trial blends and experiment and find out what I like and what the people around me like, and then go do that. But he said the combination of rye and wheat, absolutely fabulous. And he's right. He's absolutely right. The other suggestion he gave me was combining apples and honey, which in a whole nother discussion is the base for our rose liqueur and our absinthe. And I'm actually barrel aging some of that stuff. So it's one of these things that I took with us into production, and maybe the next time we're on this discussion, we'll have bottles of the blend out that I'm talking about. But I certainly have released some. I've done 3 blends like this, and the second one has already been released and sold out in the last couple of years. And so there's more coming, and it's just absolutely amazing.
Brilliant answer. Thank you so much.
I'll touch on the social media question a little bit. The whiskey enthusiast group and other whiskey groups, I kind of went and sought whiskey groups out at the request of a marketing team member. Mendocino Spirits is got a lot of spirit in it, and we're putting intentional marketing into our brand like we've never done before, because we've just been on the production side. So this is really us taking control and deciding what we want to do. And we have a great group of about 8 people that are helping us with marketing. And I was told to go seek out whiskey groups, and I did.
Yep.
I love that. I love that, and I'm glad that you found us. That's great. Eric, am I right that we have one more question from Josh Eisenberg?
Yep. And then we can wrap it.
And then we'll wrap it up.
Cool. Thanks so much. This is a quick one. Tamar, I was wondering if there's any special provenance around the botanicals that were used in the gin. I know you talked about orange peel and grains of paradise and all these amazing things. Are there any stories that you want to tell about the botanicals or the source for those botanicals that's special?
Crispin covered that a bit.
I covered it a bit.
And I would say the most magical thing about the botanicals is what the tannins and the botanicals did in the barrel together. I think surprised us all, their dramatic turn of just bringing out their flavor to the forefront. And it's almost like, an everlasting gobstopper that you can taste a different herb, in each sip. And but Crispin, well-sourced, organic ingredients.
I did.
And the grains of paradise are something that we discovered through the gin research
Yeah.
that have changed our botanical world in the gin and also the absinthe.
Yeah, and the orris root too. I
Yeah.
mean, just really amazing stuff. So, okay, what are grains of paradise? It's this peppery thing that grows in Europe. I've never actually seen the plant growing, but it's from Europe and it doesn't grow in America. The juniper berries we're using are coming from both Macedonia and from Umbria. And again, when I buy those things, the people selling them to me know what we're doing here, are familiar with the product, and they make sure they give us the absolute best stuff they can get, which is really nice of them to do. When I call them up and talk, you know, they there's been once where they actually said, let's wait 2 months because we got this stuff coming in that's going to be really top notch. So I waited. So I'm willing to do that.
And what I'm growing most these days are roses for our rose petal liqueur.
That's right.
Is where my focus is in the garden.
Sounds wonderful. So we're going to have one more question actually from William Myers, and then I will sum it up. Bill, go for it.
Hey, thanks. So real quick, I was wondering about the absinthe because I love the absinthe. Do you barrel age it or not? And have you given any thought to barrel to finishing the rye in absinthe barrels? Because we had some from Peerless that was just killer.
Well, I've never barrel aged absinthe before, and I hadn't considered it. But I have some small cooperage. I'd be willing to experiment and find out what happens. And if you say it's great, you know, that's a good recommendation to begin with.
Yeah, and we have cute little barrels to play with.
And by the way, there's a quick question that went by. Somebody said they don't like rose liqueur, rose water, but would they like rose liqueur? I will tell you that we spent 3 years, almost 3 years, developing the rose liqueur. We went after roses that absolutely taste good because rose petals are edible. We wanted roses that were fruity, that were wonderful, that weren't soapy. And because we don't want you to be drinking a bar of soap. And when you open this thing and smell it, just prepare to be amazed because it tastes like these roses smell. Absolutely
But
wonderful.
candy.
Yeah.
But yeah, brandy and candy.
Great. Wonderful.
Okay.
Wonderful. So because of the bandwidth issues, we're going to actually do things a little bit differently at the end here than we usually do. Okay, so what I want to do first before I sum everything up, I conclude everything. Jack, sorry, Crispin, Tamar, can you please tell me, is there anything else that you'd like us to know about yourselves, about your distillery, your products, before we finish up here?
You have anything?
Or did we cover everything? I mean, we covered a lot.
There's so much, but we've been hanging out for 29 years. This October will be 29 years that we've been hanging out, creating delicious things together.
Yep.
So, you know, who knows what the next 29 years will bring us all.
Well, it seems like a wonderful partnership. And I will tell everybody here that Tamar and Crispin are rather active on Facebook. They do actually like read the posts, they comment to things. So please, within our group, if you have any specific comments or questions for them, please go for it and post things there. What I'd like everybody to do right now, we're gonna try to tempt fate here with bandwidth. I'd like everybody to keep your video off, just because again we don't want to screw everything up. But if everybody could please unmute, if you're so inclined, put a dram in your glass. I, of course, am going back here. I've already finished the little sample of rye that I have. I finished the bourbon. I'm going on to the amazing gin, just incredible stuff. Everybody, please join me in saying thank you very much and cheers to Crispin and Tamar from Mendocino and Tamar Distillery. Cheers.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Cheers. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
This was wonderful. I just want to say this was great. We got up to a little rocky start, but we worked it all out. Thank you very much for a wonderful evening. I look forward to the time when we are all able to purchase this stuff more easily in different parts of the country. And of course, to when we can see each other at a whiskey event, that would be great. Let us know when you're in Chicago. We have people here from Boston, from different parts of the country. Again, thank you both very much. This has been absolutely wonderful.